Welcome one and all to yet another deep probing analysis of all my games at Kings of War tournament. This time it's AltiBASH 7 from The Forge Manchester, put on by Weight of Fire. Now, I think I'm about to join you in the corner of the screen as well, so prepare your eyes. It may be quite bright. There you go. Lovely wall of orange can only mean that it's one of my tournament reports. So let's dive straight in, shall we? Because this thumbnail isn't exciting enough to hold your attention for a full 90 minutes, but deep probing analysis of games certainly is. And I've got all my essential documents here. I've got my army list and the score sheet from the event itself. So let's go on to the first image from game one so I can take you through my army list. Now this is, you may notice the table size is a little bit smaller than usual. 4x4 because it's only 1,250 points. So we're going to see some very different lists to what you would normally expect at a tournament. Most tournaments are either 2,000, occasionally you'll get just under 2,000, and that even mixes up the lists. So when you go even lower than that, you're going to see things that you don't normally see. And it's going to be interesting to see how everyone adapts. Are people going to take kind of scaled down versions of the lists that they normally take at 2,000, or are they going to try something completely different? Are people going to just flood the table with really cheap stuff? Are they going to go for elite and not many of them? There's not that much ground to cover on 4x4, so maybe people will go that way. But then there are still going to be objectives that you need to sit on, you need to score points. So I thought that was very interesting going in. It's a point level that you don't see very often. Normally if you see it something around this level, it tends to be the first game of a tournament that then escalates upwards, but to have a whole 5 games at this level, I think it's unique in my experience anyway. There's probably been a few of them, but not that I have attended. So my list, you can see there's one unit that's not actually in the shot here. This is actually the only mat that was 4x4, so it was a special luxury playing on this one. All the others were 6x4 with masking tape down them. So my list, we've got 3 troll hordes, so that's about 50% of the points in the list on just 3 big nasty hitty units. I think that's a reasonable amount to spend if you're spending half your points on a few units that are going to do most of the heavy lifting, and then everything else is in there kind of to complement those. So we've gone for the usual upgrades on the trolls. We've got the Staying Stone, the Dwarven Ale and the Chalice of Wrath. Items that are just making them less susceptible to waver or the effects of waver, which I think is very important for trolls because they have that big waver gap with the nerf 14-17, so it's quite common that they can get wavered. And I think that's important to counter the effects of that, especially when they're the big hard-hitting units in this list. 2 regiments of Fleabag Sniffs. One of them isn't actually in the shot because they're in the far right corner, right at the bottom behind the trolls. And I'll explain why they're down there in a minute when I get to deployment. But they're very useful units. Nice shooting attack, nice for getting into position and shooting and threatening flanks at the same time. They can move around and still shoot with no penalty due to being nimble. They're really fast. And if they need to charge, then they can help out there. They're okay, especially if they can get a flank. And they're good for sitting on objectives and firing off them as well. Got the War Trombone and a Flaget with the Diadem of Dragonkind, so a couple of breath attacks there that are mainly with the idea of flyer defense. If anything's going to land behind my lines, if it's light flyers, they're going to have a really bad time when there's sniffs that can just turn around and shoot at them with no penalty, and there's the 2 sources of breath attack in there as well. So it struggle against heavy flyers, but how many heavy flyers can you really put in a list at this points level? We've got a Troll Bruiser with the Blade of Slashing, which I think is a great cheap little item for him because his attacks are so potent when they hit, that hitting on 3, generally with that Blade of Slashing you can rely on getting 4 or 5 hits out of 5. Then the Mincer. I would normally like to take a Giant in my Goblin list, but at this points level it's a bit too much of an investment I think, so the Mincer's gone in there to fill that role, which is just something else that's nice and hitty. Of course it's not as durable as the Giant, so you can't just throw it out there and expect it to live, and it does get wavered quite easily. I've found it takes a couple of points of damage and then it's wavered, but people do still have to deal with it after wavering it, of course, and that is the entire list. So the first scenario is Invade, and you can see that I'm against Abyssals here, and it's a very low defense army of Abyssals. So we'll go through my deployment here. You can see that I've got the Bruiser and this horde of trolls out on the left flank here, and they're looking at either nobody or just a troop of gargoyles. Then, in my centre, I've got one of the troll hordes there. The one with the dead elf is the dwarven ale, by the way. I always think it's interesting that a dead elf represents dwarven ale. Seems to make sense. The mincer next to them to provide support. Both the breath attacks there as well, because this is the central part of where the battle's going to take place, and if those trolls and the mincer don't succeed, then there's the backup of those breath attacks to finish off units that maybe got into a war of attrition with them. And some sniffs there as well, so they can move up to that obstacle and just shoot over it at the enemy and maybe get a bit of cover if anyone starts shooting back. There is a small amount of shooting on the enemy force. There's my other third troll horde there on the right with the sniffs right in the corner. I'm hiding the sniffs kind of out of sight of the Ifrit, who you can see right there. And out on the right there is a small unit of tortured souls. There is a large horde of the lower abyssals, and I think there's inspiring talisman on the Ifrit, it looks like, and brew of sharpness on the horde there. It's making them quite hitty. Then there are 3 succubi units, 2 troops and a regiment. They are actually very, very dangerous. They're difficult to deal with. They have ensnare and stealthy, and they have a lot of attacks, hitting on 3s, I think. So not too confident facing off against them. But of course, I do have some very hard-hitting units. Then there's the gargoyles there. And there's also a character down there as well. I think that's just an abyssal champion, something like that. Okay, so turn 1. And my opponent is going first. The gargoyles have moved straight up and got a bit of an angle on my army. There is that hill there that they can't see over that's hindering them a little bit. Anytime you've got a flyer looking down the flank, positioning them behind a hill, it depends what you're up against. If there's something else that you don't want to see you desperately, then hiding behind a hill is okay, but it does limit what they can see. There are a few things taller than the hill, like the mincer, but I don't think that's going to be in range particularly. Everything else is just advancing up a bit over that wall and towards the woods, but not going into the woods with any of those units yet. I think actually the Ifrit maybe is dipping his toe in there. No one else wants to though, because that's just going to allow me to see them, which means people are more likely to get shot. So that's how it looks at the end of that turn. The Ifrit did 2 damage to the Fleabag sniffs there, so not enough to worry them at this stage. Turn 1 to me, and you can see here that I've decided I don't like those gargoyles, I don't want them threatening my flank, so I'm going to lay down the gauntlet to them. They're going to have to either fight me and die or run away, because I'm not going to let them get into my flank here. So I've positioned the trolls in a spot where they can be charged, but if he doesn't move I will just charge them. He could land behind the trolls and get charged by the troll bruiser. I've tried to position it so there's no way he can land where that unit is safe if he wants to get behind my lines. And if he wants to just go backwards, that's fine by me, because it kind of keeps them out of the game for a bit. In the middle, the sacrificial mincer has thrown itself forward, because I want to get the first hit in on some of those units, and I don't want to get multi-charged with my trolls. So if I can have the ability to charge 1 or 2 units maybe into the same succubus unit and kill it, that's going to limit how many attacks coming back at me, because the troops of succubus I think are quite important to kill, because they have barely less attacks than the regiment and they're much easier to kill, so taking them out is probably a good idea. I think they have 20 attacks rather than 25, so you should be focusing your attention on taking down the troops if you ask me. And I've got my breath attack support there just coming up behind. Over on this side, because those lower abyssals are not in the woods, the trolls aren't worried about being charged by them, so I've just really marched forward there and laid down the gauntlet to the tortured souls. Come and attack me or I'll eat you. And if they land behind the trolls, again I've got a threat there as well with the sniffs, who have already had a couple of shots at them and put 1 damage on there. So tortured souls are a very widely used and potent unit, so I'm mildly concerned about them getting behind my lines, but you can see I've got both my regiments of sniffs in a position where if they do happen to land behind those trolls, I'm going to have lots of shots going in at them. Turn 2 for the forces of the Abyss. So you can see that the Ifrit has moved forward into the woods, and the lower Abyssals have gone in behind him, and the Tortured Souls, I don't think they charged into the trolls. I think they just moved up a little bit, level with the Horde, to prevent me getting a flank charge in that Horde, I think. Because if the Tortured Souls charge the trolls first, they probably won't kill them, and then when the trolls countercharge, there won't be any hindrance on that charge. So he wants me to hit first, so I'm hindered, so it's going to take me longer to kill them, and he's in position. It's reasonable to suspect that maybe I wouldn't even kill them, making a hindered charge with trolls. Trolls really don't like being hindered, hitting on 4 as standard, going up to 5. A slightly bad roll can make a big difference there, and they can fail to kill things quite easily in those situations. So if I do choose to attack the Tortured Souls and don't kill them, then he's got potential of a flank charge with that giant horde, which I would not like to face. In the middle, you can see one of the Succubus troops has charged into the Mincer. The other one has positioned itself in front of the trolls, and he's kind of protecting the regiment from attack. We'll see if that pays off. I'd be tempted to keep the troops behind the regiment. The regiment's more likely to take a frontal assault, and the troops hit almost as hard. And there's how it's looking over on the centre of the battlefield and on the right there. So on this side, the gargoyles decide they are going to charge the trolls, so they're going to get killed. I'd be tempted to say that they should have run away here. They could have easily got out of sight of the trolls, I think. They could have gone behind the hill. It would have then allowed the trolls to turn in towards the main bulk of the fight, and maybe he's hoping that he'll hold up those trolls for a little bit. But they are probably going to die shortly. And you never know, sometimes it's worth taking a risk if you kind of write off one of your units and just throw it in there hoping it'll take something down with it. What does Mr. Ifrit do this time? Well, he puts a bit more damage on those sniffs, but again, not enough. They are in cover at the moment. So that's helping them, I think. The Mincer takes 3 damage from the Succubus unit. That high defence at the front helps a lot there. He has positioned so nothing can get to the regiment at the back. And the gargoyles do 1 point of damage to the trolls, which, with a lucky roll, could be nice if you can get a waiver on them, but no. It wouldn't help in this situation because this one has the Chalice of Wrath, so they would have still been able to countercharge. Turn 2 for the goblins. So, my trolls do charge in there and kill the Tortured Souls. I was confident enough they would accomplish that, and they did. The Sniffs, on this side, decided to charge into the Ifrit, because in that position they're in, it would then prevent the lower Abyssal Horde from being able to pivot and charge the flank of the trolls if the trolls failed to kill the Tortured Souls. So it was kind of a backup here. So I'm just throwing them in the way just in case I failed. So you always got to think, if this plan I've got goes wrong, what are the consequences? What can I do to mitigate those consequences? And over here, I'm keeping track of all the double ones in this tournament. There'll be a picture of each double one that comes up, even if it's not really that important. Like here, it looks like I've only done 2 damage to the unit and then rolled a double 1. But there was a prize for the most double ones in the tournament, so we were making note of them all as they happened. So you'll see that there is a picture of a double 1 next to various combats where the unit wasn't even close to death for that reason, just to keep track of them. And over here, these trolls who charged into the other Succubus troop have wavered them, which is okay. I can't remember, I think they may have Fury, all of those units. We'll find out in a second. And of course the Bruiser and the Troll Horde on this side take out the Gargoyles immediately, and it looks like they regenerated their wound back as well. So now you can see the base of the trolls in the top left there. I'm now staring into the flank of this fight here with those 2 juicy troll units, although the Bruiser, I think they're both technically not on the hill at the moment, so they wouldn't be able to see over it, so they are limited in what they can see at this stage. But they are in a threatening position. So there's how it's looking at the end of that. And you can see a couple of units have died for the enemy, but they're both kind of flying chaff units, the really hard-hitting units, are still alive, but I have kind of encircled them with trolls, and I'm fairly happy, especially with the scenario here, because they're kind of, all the enemy units are stuck in a fight in the middle, and I've got the flanks pretty much free, so if it comes down to just advancing to win the scenario, then I've got things like the sniffs that I could maybe use for that, and the trolls and the bruiser on the left there. If they don't get into a fight, they can always just advance and win the scenario. I think, what's this showing here? Oh, this is the countercharging. So yeah, they're wavered, but they do countercharge, I think. And yes, okay, actually, yeah. So I took the pictures, and then I took another one because he decided, you know what, I'm going to throw the regiment and the troop into those trolls, and then the regular troop there has gone into the mincer. So all of the succubi are fighting now, but they're all exposing their flanks as well to the trolls, some of which can't see them at this stage, it should be pointed out, but I think the troll horde can potentially see a unit there if they don't kill those trolls. And there's how that looks. Over here, the lower abyssals charge into the sniffs, so if they don't kill them, the trolls are going to have that flank for dinner, but you'd expect them to eat them up, and the Ifrit just danced out the way. And then, well, he kills, what was it that was there that he killed? I think that may have been the other, was that the other sniff unit? Let's just go back and check what was in that position. Okay, it was the Flaggit. Yeah, because those were the sniffs that went into combat, the ones that were hiding down there. So it was the Flaggit that was killed. So a source of inspiring and a breath attack has gone. The Ifrit is kind of the nemesis of an army that brings lots of these small, annoying little units like I've got, like the war trombone, things like that. The Ifrit will just eat them all day long, quite happily. And the sniffs die as well, but they did their job. They prevented the trolls from being in danger. And that's how they finally lined up at the end of that. The mincer gets minced. But these trolls only take 5 damage, so that's perfectly acceptable. They get wavered, but they are the unit with Dwarven Ale, so they may be able to shrug that off. So there's how it's looking, and my trolls are going to be able to charge the flank of that succubus troop, so I should be able to kill them. I've got the war trombone that can have a go at tromboning something, and the bruiser is going to have to reposition himself next turn. So here we go. Well, that troll horde, of course, eats the succubus unit in the flank, because in the flank they don't have their ensnaring ability, so they're toast. And this unit, which takes a countercharge from the trolls, they become wavered again. Or I think it was the troop that got wavered last time, but they become wavered, but I think they all have fury though. The trombone wavers that unit, which is a big deal because fury doesn't mean that you can do anything when wavered, it just means you can only countercharge. So that unit can now not do anything next turn of note, all they can do is move. So good job, Mr. Trombone. Over here, the other Fleabag Sniffs decide to join in with the charge on the trolls. Join in the charge with the trolls on the lower abyssals. It wasn't entirely necessary that they did this, but the lower abyssals, with that brew of sharpness, they've got high nerve, and it would be a close one in a one-on-one fight with the trolls. So I'm giving my opponent something extra to think about there, just throwing 2 units in. Who do you countercharge? Do you countercharge the cavalry unit that you'll probably kill, but then the trolls are just going to hit you back? Or do you go for the trolls, who are more of a threat, when the cavalry aren't in a position to become hindered either? So just giving your opponent something extra to think about, throwing another unit in there, and I would rather he target the Fleabag Sniffs, because the trolls are more valuable, they're a horde, so for the scenario they're worth more points, and also the longer you leave it before hitting the trolls, the easier it's going to be for them to win in the fight overall. I think both units have regeneration though, but I'm hoping that if I can just keep that fight going a bit longer, even if the trolls don't have to win out imminently, because I think it's going very well on the other flank, and I've got things like the bruiser that can be coming in to help, and start attacking them on 2 flanks, on 2 fronts there, so 1 in the flank. We'll see how that goes. So, turn 4 for the abyssals. So, the wavered succubus regiment go back into the trolls, and the succubus troop just turn round because they can't do anything due to their wavered nature. The lower abyssals do go back into the sniffs, and they regen some wounds as well. What does Mr. Ifrit do this time? Well, he kills the war trombone, so that's what he's really good at, and he succeeded there. So Troll Horde down, and over here the sniffs die as well. So that's how the units turn at the end of that. So I'm going to be able to charge into that wounded unit of Succubus there, that regiment, but I will be ensnared. But they are already wounded, so it's going to be close on whether they die. The trolls against the horde over there on the right, I'm not going to be able to kill them in one round because they're regenerating, so I need something else to come over and help. Turn 4. So, the Troll Bruiser, in fact let's just go back to the picture to show you what the Troll Bruiser does here. The Bruiser is able to charge the Abyssal Champion, I think it is there in the middle. Because it's in the front, so the Bruiser has to make contact with the front, which he can do because he's nimble, and we worked out the exact angle of that model meant that he could touch the front corner. So he was able to make that charge, and then the individual turns to face him. And if that's horribly incorrect, I'm sure someone will point it out in the comments, but I think we did that correctly. So the trolls kill the Succubus unit that was already wounded with a front charge. The Abyssal Champion there gets wavered by the Bruiser. And the Bruiser is now in a really good position, which you'll see in a moment. So, the Troll Horde get that unit back up in damage again. But, look at this. So the Bruiser at the moment can see the rear of that horde of lower abyssals. So if they countercharge the trolls and don't kill them in one hit, then they are going to get rear charged by a Troll Bruiser unless something else happens to him, like he gets blocked off or wavered. And it's unlikely you can block him off because he's nimble. So, yeah, it's do or die time for the Abyssals, I think, because they're running low on units, especially scoring ones. Turn 5. So this troop of Succubi, there's nothing for them to attack this turn, so they just decide to sprint into the enemy half to get some points. And you can see that we were checking the arc of sight, or the charge arc for the trolls, before everything was being positioned. And the Ifrit is going to do some shooting. So this creature here, which also has Fury, I think, was able to countercharge the Bruiser, but didn't really do anything, as far as I recall. Let's see, look at that, regenerating those wounds back again. The lower abyssals. The Ifrit puts 5 damage onto that Troll Horde, and 5 damage onto that Troll Horde from the combat. Turn 5 for the Goblins. So the Bruiser does exactly what I said. I was hoping that the horde of lower abyssals weren't just going to shuffle sideways, because for a start that would mean that when the trolls charged them they would be hindered again, and the Bruiser would no longer be able to see them. But I'm assuming my opponent just didn't notice that the Bruiser had a rear charge on them, so he was able to get in the rear. Even though it was hindered, he's still hitting on 4s with 15 attacks in the rear, and the trolls in the front who were counter-charging, so they weren't hindered. So we just munched that horde to death, and now they're both turning to face enemy territory where they're going to head for the scenario. And the other troll horde is heading up that way as well, just abandoning the Ifrit, just letting him run around, throwing fireballs, and making a beeline for enemy territory. Turn 6 for the Abyssals, and you can see this little champion is trying to kill the horde there. If he was able to kill both hordes of trolls, and it was only the Bruiser alive, then it would have been 1 victory point each, so it could have got a draw out of it. The Ifrit puts some damage onto that troll horde, but only wavers them, which isn't really enough at this stage, and nothing really happens there. So that's how it's looking at the end of Abyssal turn 6. Goblin turn 6, everything just turns round a bit or continues walking into enemy territory, just to make sure they're in the right spot, and that is the end of the game. So there is no turn 7 in this game, and that means that the Goblins have got 7 victory points for 2 hordes, since it's on unit strength, 2 hordes and the Bruiser there, and the Abyssals have the 1 troop of Succubus. So, the way the tournament is scored though, for tournament points, the bonuses you get on top of the 10 for a win, there's a maximum of 5 for scenario victory points, but it's 1 bonus tournament point per scoring unit, not unit strength. So it's unit strength for determining who wins, but for tournament bonus points, it's determined by how many units. So I assume that's a bit of a balancing thing there, so I'm going to get 3 victory points for that. I got 3 on the kill point bonus as well, out of 5, because there are a couple of expensive things, fairly expensive things left, the Ifrit and the other individual and a single troop. So a healthy win to start with there on the invade scenario, and we're going to move on to game number 2. I'm not on the top table at this point. A couple of people must have had large wins in the first round, presumably. I think I was on maybe table 3 or something like that, I think. So this one is the pillage scenario, which is where you have, it says 5 objectives. It was specified on the sheet, not random. 5 objectives on this, and you can see the wonderful bit of masking tape there on the right, marking off on the 6x4 mat where the table is actually taking place, where the battle is taking place on the table. And you can see where the objectives are. Now these are placed before you roll for sides. So when I was placing mine, I took a bit of a gamble and put more on the side that I ended up deploying on, and then I won the roll off for sides and I picked this side, I think. But they're not so far back. You'll see where they all are in a moment. We've got Steve and Raphael in the chat. The mat looks good on this table. Yeah, all the mats were very nice. Very decent terrain, I would say. So I'm against undead this time, and you'll be able to see a better view when my face isn't over the top of them in a minute. So on this flank you can see there's one of the objectives there, and I've got my sniffs, and sniffs are great at hanging around objectives and shooting off them. And I've got my 2 troll hordes backed up by the bruiser and the trombone and the flagget as well. So I've got all my inspiring in one spot, but there isn't really any shooting and the opposition, so I'm not worried about things being uninspired early in the game. I've got the mincer and a troll horde in the middle, and I've got the sniffs on the left flank there staring at another objective. And opposite them there is a regiment of ghouls. That's the only undead unit on that side of the table. So I'm very confident that the sniffs will be able to eventually shoot them down while sitting on this objective, because there are some woods between them, but of course sniffs can just dart up, dip their toe in the woods and shoot through them. And there's a lot of meat here. There are 2 zombie regiments and 1 zombie legion. Everyone loves a zombie legion. One of the lists I was actually thinking about taking to this tournament was a triple zombie legion, which would have been about half the points on just wall of zombie deadness. There are 2 hordes of werewolves and a mounted vampire. So I'm concerned about that. That's the kind of thing that isn't going to be worried too much about my flagget with his diadem or a war trombone. If he's going in there unhurt, just makes a beeline to eat something like the trombone, then that would be bad news. And because he's individual also, my sniffs, if I was using them to counter him by turning around and shooting at him, then they would be on -1 to hit an individual. So I'm going to have to make sure my war trombone's protected, because that's really the only thing that's going to really scratch him if he gets behind my lines, I think. And you can see another objective on that hill there. And there's one right in front of the zombies and one in the middle there. And this one here. So turn 1. And I go first. I can't remember whether I won the roll-off or not, but I am going first. So the sniffs, as I said, just dip their toe in the woods, and they shoot over there at the ghouls, who have very low defense, so they're a great target for kind of this chaff shooting / anti-chaff shooting. And they waver them immediately, so that's nice, holding them up. And I would think now it's very likely I'll be able to kill them before they get to me, since they're not going to be able to move forward next time much. And over here everything else is moving up. There is that hill there, which is handy because the werewolves are obviously very fast, and I do not want to be double charged by werewolves. Just a regular horde of werewolves charging into the front of a troll horde, I would reasonably like my chances of survival. 2 werewolf hordes into the front and it's just instant death. And even 1 into a bruiser, I would say he would die. So he's not on the front lines. I've only put things on the front lines that I think can survive a frontal charge from the werewolves, and I'm only going to allow my opponent, hopefully, to charge in one at a time. Because the way he's positioned them, one behind the other, but one is slightly to the left, so that one has its view obscured by the hill at this stage. And you can see my shooting on that side has chipped away at the werewolves as well. There's no healing on this undead army, but they do have life leech, so they're only going to get those wounds back when they get into combat. Turn 1 for the undead. So the ghouls, I think, just move backwards a bit, which is okay by me. Over here, the wall of zombie meat is just moving forward as fast as it can, which isn't very fast at all. I'm not overly concerned by all that, because the only surge he's got is the vampire, and if the vampire's surging units, then it's probably being played incorrectly, I would say. It should be in there fighting, and they're very slow, these zombies, so if I don't throw things needlessly in front of them that I want to live, then I should be okay there. So the werewolves, one of them is looking down towards this big bulk of a force I've got on the right with the troll hordes. The other one is kind of looking over towards the centre. So that one I'll have to be wary of if I'm advancing in the middle. But I'm glad it's not kind of over on this side as well, because I'd rather just deal with one horde of werewolves at a time, like I said earlier. So, turn 2 for the goblins. The sniffs, they waver the ghouls again. I think the yellow represents 5 wounds on them. So, again, that's fine, because the sniffs aren't going to move from this spot anyway. They're just going to stay here because there's an objective there. And shooting them up big time. On this side, you can also see that I haven't left a big enough gap for the werewolves to charge into the sniffs, because that would obviously be bad if they charge into a unit that's at the back of my army and then we're able to just turn around and look at my flanks and make everything rotate. So I've not left a big enough gap there. And put a bit more damage on that unit. And the thing with trolls, they hit hard, but typically against something of kind of equal power, they don't kill it in one go. So if you can chip away damage on things before the trolls get into combat, that helps a lot. It makes them much more likely to kill things in one hit if you've already chipped away at them a bit. And sniffs are obviously really good at that, just doing just 1 or 2 or 3 damage a turn, just slowly chipping away. Turn 2 for the undead. So again, zombies moving forward. But the zombie horde isn't moving forward, just the regiment, and the regiment has actually moved into charge range of my forces now, but the legion isn't. Over on this side, the werewolves get tired of getting shot up, because realistically, if they take another round of shooting that goes a similar way, if they take another 2 or 3 damage, then they may end up getting wavered, and that would really cramp their style, I would say. So they've decided to go in now, thrust themselves towards the enemy, and they have the unit that I've presented to them for the charge is the one with the dwarven ale as well, knowing that their werewolves, when they make that first hit on the trolls that are undamaged, likelihood is they either won't do anything or they'll probably waver them. They're unlikely to kill them in the first hit, especially while they're inspired. So the dwarven ale unit being wavered won't be as big of a deal. There's a chance they'll ignore it. And well, look at that live action there. It's almost like watching video, isn't it? And the other werewolf horde has moved onto the hill, so they are now presenting a threat. So I'm going to have to factor in those guys when I'm making any decisions. I imagine they will have stayed out of troll charge range, though. I'm not 100% on that, though, because there is that fence that the trolls would have to go through to get there. And the vampire is also in a dangerous position now, but he's height 2, and all the units fighting here are also height 2. Which means that I can hide things behind my horde so the vampire can't see them, which is very important because I don't want him getting behind my lines. He's an absolute monster. So one zombie regiment is just hanging back a bit. So you can see the werewolf charge in doing 8 damage, which is a reasonable amount. I think that's pretty much what you'd expect to do. And they do waver the trolls, which is okay. We'll see if they can shrug off the effects of that. And you can see that the zombie regiment has put itself in charge range of my trolls and the mincer, because that zombie legion there, anyone that goes into those zombies and fails to kill them would not have a good time. turn 3 for the goblins. So the Dwarven Ale did not work, so that unit just had to go backwards and allow the other troll units to go into the flank, which you can see there, they've got a flank open. So the other troll unit eats the werewolves in the flank, and that's fine by me. And I've positioned everything so that the vampire can't see the war trombone or anything else that's really juicy that I don't want him to eat. But he could still just dance around behind my lines because he's so fast. But he's likely wants to be charging something, so I don't want to give him such a juicy target as a war trombone. What does the war trombone do? Well, it puts a couple of damage onto those werewolves on the hill because they're on a height 2 hill, so I can ignore height 2 units between them, which means that he could shoot over the top of the trolls. And also I've positioned the war trombone so that there's no space for the werewolves to charge it because they're in the front and there's no space at all for them to fit themselves in there. And the sniffs move a bit further into the woods because the ghouls keep moving backwards, and waver them again, 3rd turn in a row. So I'm quite satisfied with how it's looking so far. I've made sure that those trolls, after they killed the werewolves, they've positioned themselves so they're not going to get flanked by the werewolves, and they're out of charge range of the zombies, and the vampire doesn't have enough surge to get anything into the flank of them. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but the mincer also went into that regiment on its own. But I've positioned the trolls kind of in the centre so that the way they're angled, if the werewolves charge all the way down there into them, they're going to become hindered by the fence. The same thing if they charge the troll bruiser there as well. And the trolls are also positioned in such a way so that they'll be able to see the zombie legion should that decide to charge into the mincer. The mincer's done, I think it's 4 damage maybe to that zombie regiment, but the mincer's quite happy to entice the legion to fight because the legion's going to be hindered as well. It's on a fence, so they'll be hitting on 6s. So lots of attacks, but may not kill it. Turn 3, so the zombie regiment moves backwards. The zombie legion flank charges the mincer. We'll see if they can kill it on a hindered charge. It's going to be 80 attacks. But it's in the flank though, so it's defense 4 from there. So it's possible. It wouldn't take a horrendously bad roll not to kill it, hitting on 6s. And here you can see that the werewolves do go into the troll bruiser. They think that's the most attainable target. It is hindered, but he's got lower nerve than the other units around here that were chargeable. And the vampire has gone into the wounded troll unit, so that is a big concern there, because they're already on 7 damage. The vampire, I think he's got about 8 attacks, so he could easily almost double their damage, you would say, and get them almost to double 1 town. They are inspired by the bruiser though, but that combat could be done first. And I don't think the Flaggett is around there. You can see the Flaggett actually just poking his head out at the bottom of the screen towards the left there, so he's not going to be able to help. The bruiser is dead. Hindered charge by the werewolves does actually kill him. And then they turn to face these trolls, so if I want to charge into them, there's going to be a big hindrance there. The trolls on this side from the vampire, they're up to 9 damage and they become wavered, so that's quite fortunate. It's the Dwarven Ale unit again, so I'm glad they've survived. And look at this. So that zombie legion in the flank of the mincer, hitting on 6s, they only do 5 damage, and then they roll a double 1 just to compound it all. But of course, only doing 5 damage is very disappointing for a start. So the zombie legion is now exposed. It's flanked my trolls, who are almost definitely going to take that up. And also what I'm going to do, you can see the sniffs can see the rear of the werewolves. So I'm going to take that rear charge on the werewolves. There's nothing to hinder them. So I don't know whether the sniffs in the rear would kill the werewolves, but it's definitely worth a go. It's not very often that someone presents you with a unit that's pretty decent when charging into flanks and rear with such a nice opportunity there. Raphael says lol, probably talking about sniffs in the rear, probably set off his uncontrollable laughter. Okay, turn 4. Is that 2 pictures of turn 4 dice? Yes, it is. Yes, the zombies should have eaten that mincer, but they failed. So the mincer countercharges the zombies and the troll horde into the flank as well. The Flaggit didn't join in with the charge, he's just hiding from anything that might want to charge him. And I've got them up to quite a lot of damage. It looks like, I think the red represents 10, so that looks like about 21 damage perhaps there, but not enough to get rid of them yet. The sniffs over here, these are the ones that were shooting at the ghouls earlier, they take aim and they kill the zombie regiment. So that's a nice bonus, because they don't need to shoot the ghouls now because the ghouls are so far away at the moment. So zombie regiment dead. The trolls on the hill, they charged into the werewolves. Let me just go back and show you. When was the last wide shot? Oh no, it wasn't werewolves, it was the zombie regiment on the hill. So the troll unit that are currently able to see them, they charged up there and ate them. Breakfast, so both zombie regiments dead. The rear charge from the sniffs didn't do too much damage by the looks of it, and not enough to even waver the werewolves, so they are a big threat now. The trolls passed their Dwarven Ale headstrong roll and wavered the vampire on the countercharge, so that's very nice indeed. So that's how it's looking. So the werewolves do have a flank charge on that troll horde, but they will be hindered if they decide to make it. They could countercharge the sniffs if they want and not be hindered, but those sniffs aren't as much of a threat as the trolls. And at this stage, the objectives, the Zombie Legion and the Mincer have an objective right between them. There's one behind the sniffs on the left, there's one in the bottom right hand corner that you can just see there, there's one kind of in the centre at the top of the screen, up from the Zombie Legion, between the fence and the tree. So I've got more scoring units alive, I think, at the moment, because those ghouls are going to die before they get anywhere useful. So I think it's looking quite good. If that vampire survives, though, even though he can't score, if I don't kill him in the next turn, because he's wavered now, so he's not going to be able to do anything now, if I don't kill him next time, then he can potentially just finish off units on his own. But that whole round of not attacking for him could be crucial, because the trolls that he would want to finish off are now going to be regenerating another turn without having anything chipped off them by him. So the werewolves do go into the flank of the trolls, and the Zombie Legion go back into the Mincer for the second time, hoping to make up for their abysmal round last time. The vampire just gets out of the troll's charge arc. And look at that. So another double one. It didn't need to be a double one in this situation, because they only did 8 damage. So on average you would expect the unit to maybe get wavered, and they had the Chalice of Wrath anyway, and they're inspired right there. So you wouldn't expect that much damage to kill them, but the double one is always comical anyway. So that's not healthy for them. The Zombie Legion make up a bit for what they did last time, though. They kill the Mincer and they get some wounds back. I think they've got 2 undead rats, or they've got an undead rat, so that puts their life leech up to 2, I think, so they were able to get some wounds back. And there's how it looks at the end of that turn. So the Zombie Legion turn to face the action. Those werewolves, because they failed to kill the trolls in the flank, they're now going to get flanked by trolls, most likely, the ones on the hill. And the vampire, the only thing I've got to deal with him are my shooting attacks, because no one can charge him at the moment. Turn 5. So the sniffs in the rear, the trolls in the flank, the werewolves are no more. The War Trombone finishes off the vampire. The troll horde finishes off the Zombie Legion, and they're sitting pretty on an objective now. The sniffs finish off the ghouls, and they're sitting on an objective. The trolls are sitting on that objective, and the objective on the hill is held by those trolls. So yeah, I'm sitting on 4 of the 5 objectives, which is nice, obviously, and I've killed every single enemy unit, so it's another win for the Orange Goblins of Doom, and almost maximum points for that round then. Just wasn't able to get the other objective up there. So 2 nice juicy wins so far, and up next we have the Occupy scenario. Now this is one of the armies that I was mildly concerned about facing when I was just doing a quick browse around the room looking at the various armies. This one seems like it would have some tools to deal with what I bring to the table. And obviously this army's been doing well because I think this is the top table now at this stage. So this is Salamanders, but it's a very interesting list at this points level. So we'll go through that in a minute. But the Occupy scenario, so the objectives on the table, there are 3 near the centre line, I think, and then there's 2 kind of back objectives that are worth more. If you can get to the one in your opponent's territory, it's worth a healthy number of points. And I'll show you exactly where they are in close-up format in a minute, I'm sure. So over on the right flank, we've got Fleabag Sniffs. And you'll see that actually all my light kind of chaffy shooty units are hiding on this side, and you'll see why in a minute. So they've got the Flaget there, they've got the Trombone, they've got a couple of Troll Hordes, and the other Sniffs hiding there, the Mincer, and over on the left we've just got the Bruiser and a Troll Horde. So this is why all my light units were hiding, because there are 3 units of Corsairs, Salamanders, and Firebrand, and it's a formation, I think, so they've all got 12-inch range on their guns, but they all have Vanguard, and I think they're elite, they have piercing on their shooting, so they're like the ultimate chaff clearers, so I didn't want to put anything that was just going to get killed off in one go anywhere near them, so I've put all my light stuff on totally the opposite side of the table to them. And there is also there's these 2 ancients. Are they ancients on rhinosaurs, something like that? 2 big hordes of those. They're large cavalry, I think, so they're very nasty. So I'm going to have to be concerned with them. And there's also a fire-breathing, like a firebolt lizard. I can't remember what it's called though, but it's hiding just behind the forest. And there's also a mounted hero there as well. You can see in the middle of the screen there with an axe. So with the Vanguard moves, that's where they've all ended up. So they're going to be able to shoot. If the Salamanders get turn 1, they'll maybe, if they all combine their fire, take out a unit, which I'm concerned about. But you can see some of the objectives there as well. I win the roll-off though to get turn 1, which I felt was very important. So immediately I'm just going to get right up in their face, and not within charge range of most of them. Over on this side, the Sniffs have just moved up and just angled themselves in to threaten in that direction. I haven't put my Trolls up in range of their cavalry, because that would be crazy, I think. So they're just out at the moment, I think. And the Mincer is turning its front towards all the enemy shooty units, because it doesn't want to get shot in the flank, the defence 4 side. The Sniffs on the hill so they can shoot. And over on this side, so these Trolls have just plonked themselves fully in range of the enemy charge. I think 3 units there have the option to charge these Trolls that I've just put there. And the thinking behind that is, I don't want those units just shooting me, maybe even going backwards and shooting me and running away from combat. I want to tempt them in so that we're actually up close and personal fighting. And I've got the Mincer and the Bruiser angled in there so they can just thrust in, because the Corsair units, they're not easy to kill, I would say, but they're not the toughest. They're not the toughest units out there. So I could definitely have a good go at killing them. And of course the Fleabag Sniffs, from their position on the hill, can also make a charge if need be. So those Trolls, am I willing to let them die so I can get charges in on all those units? Maybe, but if they do declare a charge on them, they may not even kill them. But basically I just don't want them standing still and shooting me to bits, because I think my opponent has a slight shooting edge on me, so I'd rather get combat initiated, so I've got to lay down some kind of temptation for that. So there's how the whole battle line's looking. And I do a bit of shooting damage onto one of those units as well, one of the Corsair units. So turn 1 for the Salamanders. They do make a triple charge. 2 of the units and Firebrand charge into the Trolls, which is kind of expected. It was kind of hoped for, because it's now brought them really close to my battle line, and the Mincer and the Bruiser are ready to strike. The 2 heavy cavalry units are working their way up. I think one of them has the potion of the caterpillar. I think that's why they're in the trees. And that lizard is just being annoying, doing its ranged attack, and the other unit of Corsairs has come over this way as well. Probably as a troll trap. If the trolls charge in there, they're then in range of the cavalry, so they'd get eaten. And the little hero just running around the back to inspire. So the shooting damage, it does 4 on the sniffs on the hill. And another double 1, but again it's not really a double 1 that really did anything, because 7 damage, you wouldn't really expect to kill them with that. You'd hope for a waver probably against trolls with 7 damage. But they are the ones with the staying stone as well, so it's even more difficult. So that means that these juicy units here are now prime, in position, ready to be charged. The bruiser is going to be able to join in. And yeah, so in fact it jumps straight to my turn now. Look at that. So the trolls and the bruiser, I think, charge the same unit, and the mincer and the sniffs charge the other unit. I believe that's how it went. And yeah, so that picture seems to be out of sequence there, because only Firebrand's alive and then it shows turn 2. But the shooty attacks of the War Trombone and the Flaget, they kill off the other Corsair unit, so the entire formation is just destroyed apart from Firebrand. So those 3 units I was worried about, that I tried to tempt in to charge the trolls, they went for it and now they're all dead. And the sniffs on this side have just looked up into the flank there of that cavalry unit, so they're going to have to move or get flank charged, which they may be okay with. But I've made sure I'm not positioning myself anywhere that I can be charged by their cavalry with the trolls over on that side, because that would be bad news. The trolls don't want to take a frontal charge from them. And I mean, look at that battlefield now, it just looks really good already. If I can kill those units. Turn 2 for the salamanders. So Firebrand charges the trolls, and the fire-breathing lizard wavers the War Trombone. These trolls become wavered from Firebrand, which isn't too bad because I've got the bruiser and the mincer around here to help. And those knights decided they had enough of not fighting, and they just went for the sniffs that were in range of them, so they got eaten. But it does mean that the trolls are going to get to charge them now, which is nice. So there's how it's looking, and now I'm ready to strike. So turn 3, the sniffs decide to charge into the flank of that unit, and really, because they're going to have the opportunity to charge my trolls if they want after this, I'm not trying to kill them now, I'm just trying to take away their thunderous charge, because that will make it much more difficult for them to kill the trolls in one hit. And you can see that the mounted hero there tried to block off the sniffs, but of course they're nimble, so they don't care about such things. And of course charging in the flank means they don't need a yellow-bellied test as well, which is handy. The 2 troll units charged into the other cavalry unit and ate them for dinner, as you would expect. Double troll attack. Firebrand takes a bit of damage from the bruiser and the mincer, so he's kind of surrounded on all sides, and there's not much left for the enemy here. So turn 3 for the salamanders. What do they do? Well, this little hero rolls another double 1, but again it was one that doesn't really matter because it only did 3 damage, just keeping track of them because there was a prize for the most double 1s, so I think it's interesting to keep a check on how many there were. You can see that that lizard has just positioned itself in front of the trolls, and the heavy cavalry, large cavalry, countercharge the sniffs, while the trolls aren't able to charge in next time because that lizard's in the way. Brendan is here, and it's morning where he is apparently, which I'm going to assume is New Zealand, I think. Okay, so the sniffs are dead, as expected. And Firebrand does a bit more damage to the trolls, but not much. And there's his damage dice back down. Turn 4 for the goblins. So Firebrand gets eaten, multi-charged, and everyone just turns around to face the action. Apart from, there is the question of the objectives, of course, in this scenario, and there is one over here, so the trolls are actually near it right now. So these trolls go in and they kill the lizard, And I think I made a little bit of a mistake here because I positioned the flagget, you can see here, just sitting in front of that unit to stop them charging the trolls after I killed the lizard. But I thought, you know what, there's quite a big gap here. That cavalry unit could just move backwards and not be charged by the trolls yet. They don't need to take that little bit of bait. So I think I'll overrun, and I think I overran an obscene amount. I may have even overrun 6 inches, which actually brought me to a position where he could potentially overrun the flagget into the trolls next turn if he gets an obscenely high roll. So we'll see if that gamble pays off. The war trombone does a bit of damage to that guy. Not enough, really. And there's how it's looking. So very healthy. It's obviously going to be a goblin win at this stage, barring any major miracles at this stage. Raphael Marsh says, are you planning to make some Andy and Rem shows? Yes. Soon, hopefully. So that one scoring unit that the Salamanders have left isn't going to be enough to win them the scenario here, but they can get some kill points, of course. Turn 4 for them. So they do overrun the flagget, and then I think they needed a 5 or a 6 to overrun into the trolls, and they did actually make it. And waver them, which was a bit lucky for me. The gamble of overrunning on that lizard and then rolling a high number almost backfired there, but they've just survived, and they are the Dwarven Ale carrying unit, so that's not too bad being wavered there. Turn 5, the goblins. So the Dwarven Ale unit do not make a successful headstrong roll, so they just move backwards, and everyone else is just closing in for the kill on that unit and spreading out to cover objectives. So the bruiser is staying back because there's an objective just above his shoulder, and the central one here, I want to get to the enemy base objective, which is right in the back corner though. So shooting damage onto them, I think that's from the trombone, so they're heavily wounded now. And so this is the next turn now, and I don't think they actually... Do they charge the trolls? I think they do charge the front troll unit and kill them and then move backwards afterwards. So they're in the difficult terrain, so if someone charges them they'll be hindered. So troll horde dead, but I'm now going to be able to charge with whatever I want. Turn 6, so of course it's a triple charge of doom. Trolls and Mincer and other trolls. And everything just charged into the unit. I ignored the individual there because that would have ended the game, and I'm not currently on all the objectives, so I actually want that thing to stay alive, because I don't think you can just continue playing when all your opponent's units are dead. As far as I'm aware, there was some debate earlier in the day about whether that was the case or not. I would have to check to see if it's been covered in the FAQ, because the rulebook doesn't seem to be clear on it unless there's a passage that I haven't seen. But generally, I've always seen it played that when you've tabled your opponent, the game just ends. I have seen some tournaments where they give you a maximum scenario win if you table your opponent. So there is a case for keeping things alive while you jump to the objectives. Because there's one right in the top right, behind where my face is here, even further up than that, there's another objective that I want to get to with the trolls. So I took quite a while positioning all these units to get them into the optimum spots to actually reach all the different objectives. Because there you can see it now in the top right, and there's another one underneath this rock with the turn dice on it on the right hand side, and there's one in the centre, so I want to be sitting on all these objectives to get as many points as possible. Because I'm already on the top table, so you just want to rack up points and points and points, because there's no worry about, oh, if I score too many points I might end up on a table that's too high and face someone who's really, really good, because once you're already on the top table, such things don't even come into your mind. They don't generally come into my mind anyway. I know some people have played tactically, but that's not really something that I do. I tend to just go for as many points as possible regardless, because you might need them at the end, and if you just happen to play someone really good, that's fine. I don't think tactically about scoring less than I could, typically. So there is a turn 7 which I needed to get onto the objectives, and I was able to leap to the enemy base objective, and that one, and that one, and that's how the game's going to end, because there's not much my opponent could do really with that one character left. And looking at my sheet here, did I get maximum points? Yes, I didn't kill everything, but that character was worth sufficiently low number of points that I did get maximum points for the game. So already top of the table, or second on this game, and then maximum points, so definitely going to be at the top of the leaderboard now. And going into game 4, so still on the top table now, and this time the scenario is dominate, which I think is quite a good one for my army, I think, because my units that have most of the unit strength, they're the kind of units that I would want to get into a big brawl in the centre anyway, with the 3 troll hordes, and then the kind of peripheral units either don't have any unit strength, or they're the lesser unit strengths. The sniffs are less than a troll horde, so keeping them on the flank, even if they don't make it to the centre, it's not as big of a deal as if a horde didn't make it there. And then I've got the Mincer and the Bruiser as well, who provide that little bit of unit strength also. So in this game, what am I against in this top table clash? Well, I'm up against the Herd. Have you heard about the Herd? Well, you're about to. So here's my deployment. On the flank, I've got a Mincer. You'll see what I'm countering potentially in a moment. I've got my Sniffs packed right into the corner again, and when you see that, you can usually assume that the opponent has something really fast that I want to stay away from as long as possible, or they have shooting that I want to stay out of range of. There's that meaty centre with the war trombone backing up. I've got all 4 of my nice hard-hitting troll units there in a line, all ready to strike, and I've got the other Sniffs over there on the left in the corner as well. So, the enemy army, what is it? Well, the kind of units that I would be concerned coming up against are faster than trolls and hit like a train and can take out trolls in one hit. And that's exactly how I would describe a stampede. There's no way of limiting that with the terrain either. They don't care about fences, fields, anything. They'll just trample straight through it and eat you. So there are 2 stampedes there. There's also a beast pack behind them, which is a bit of a chaff unit. And it's understandable that they're positioned behind a stampede because I have lots of anti-chaff shooting that would just turn them into, I think they're cats, so it just turn them into little kitty pincushions, essentially. There is some kind of shaman between the 2 stampedes. There is a regiment, and I think, is it Spirit Walkers? Is that what the Herd unit is called? I think that's it. I think the person next to them is probably a Centaur Chief. Someone may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it is. And a horde of Lycans who are very similar to werewolves. So there's basically all this stuff is as fast or faster than trolls. And I'm going to have to make sure that they don't charge my trolls before I hit them. Because with the Stampede, they're not 100% reliant on their thunderous charge, but it is a big deal. It could be the difference between trolls actually surviving a hit from them and not. So you need to get the first combat hit on them. So I'm going to have to use calculated sacrifice of certain units to do a little bit of damage to them, just to make sure they're not getting a charge in on my trolls with their full thunderous charge, because that would be a bad time. So, turn 1, and I get turn 1, and I can't remember whether I took turn 1 by choice or whether it was thrust upon me, but you can see that I've pushed up the trolls, but there is a hill there. The trolls are not on the hill, and the Lycans, who are the really fast unit, are over on the right as I look at it, and the beast pack, who are really fast, would get eaten if they were to just charge in, so I'm not concerned about being charged at the moment, but I have stayed out of charge range of the Stampede, who can see over the hill because they're height 3. And the Mincer is kind of there to just prevent the Lycans from just going full speed ahead towards those Sniffs, because of course Lycans versus Fleabag Riders is not going to be a pretty sight for me, so if I can push the Mincer forward and give them a bit of a deterrent from advancing forward too fast, then I can just shoot them up. Because I think they're lower defense than werewolves, the Lycans, so they're very shootable. Okay, so starting the process of chipping away at the Lycans. I think they do have regen though. And also, look at that, 4 damage onto the Stampede already from my shooting. So laser guided arrows from the Fleabag Riders there, and that's what you need. Especially, it's going to be really a tight one. If I can get them damaged enough so the trolls can kill them, then that would be a huge benefit. There is healing available to the enemy here, but if I can do damage to multiple units, they'll have to spread it around, and it also means if they're doing that, they can't cast other spells like Bane Chant. So turn 1 for the Herd, and the Lycans have moved up, staying out of charge range of the Mincer, but I think they've failed to regenerate their wound. I think you can see it in the background there. It hasn't moved up with them yet. The Beast Pack just positions itself in front of all my trolls, so I'm not actually too concerned about this, because my plan now, as soon as I see how this is positioned, what I'm going to do, the Stampede at the moment can charge, both of them are in range to charge my trolls, they can both see over the hill. I don't want to go backwards, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw away my Troll Bruiser, charge it, nimble charge it around the Beast Pack, and charge it straight into one of the Stampedes, and then the Fleabag Rider Sniffs, who are off screen to the left, are going to charge straight into the front of the other Stampede, assuming they pass their yellow-bellied roll. So both the Stampedes will be pinned in place then, so that I can kill the Beast Pack with the Trolls, and then worry about the Stampede and not get charged by them, because the Trolls are the key unit here, especially for a scenario like this where you need their unit strength and their hitting power. They're the only things I would be confident that they could kill the Stampede, so I don't want the Trolls being hit first. And then, because those Lycans are obviously perilously positioned there to charge into the flank of any Trolls that are hanging out in that area, if I then kill the Beast Pack, I could turn the Trolls to face them and not worry about the Stampede, because I've tied both of them up in combat. But I wouldn't be able to turn to face them all the way, because then that would mean that they weren't in position to go for the Stampede the following turn. But I've also got the dilemma of, do I charge the Sniffs into the Lycans to potentially hold them up? But they are nimble, so I might be better off just shooting them. So turn 2, exactly what I do there. I do roll a double 1. Again, there's a picture of it, but it didn't really matter because I didn't do enough damage to kill them yet anyway. So I did damage to both of those Stampede units, and now they're both blocked in. So that is all right by me. So I'm probably going to lose both of these units shortly, but that's okay because the Trolls will be able to get stuck in there in a minute. So the Fleabag Sniffs and the Diadem of Dragonkind, they waver the Lycans, which is absolutely perfect because now they're stuck and they can't join in the central fight yet. And so that's how that looks. Obviously the two Trolls there ate the Beast Pack, and the other one is just moving up. They're not on the hill yet, any of those Trolls, so they can't see over to some of the other units. I think the Spirit Walkers, and they were prepared to take the charge of the Lycans, but now they don't have to worry about that at all. So I can now concentrate on the centre. Turn 2 for the Stampedes. Well, the Stampede making up the threatening part of the Herd army. So turn 2 for the Herd. And they are going to counter-charge into the Sniffs and the Bruiser, of course, because why not? Get them killed. The Lycans are just positioning themselves out of charge range of those Trolls, wisely, and the Flaget has been charged by the Centaur Chief. So there's that charge, and the Sniffs are dead, as expected. The Bruiser only takes 6 damage, though. So that's a nice little bonus that he didn't die from the Stampede. Of course, they lose their Thunderous Charge because he damaged them, but I would expect them to do a little bit more than that. And of course, when you're doing 6 damage to a Bruiser, you would hope that you actually at least waver him as well. So yeah, that's quite poor. And a couple of damage there done to the Flaget in a nice blurry image. So that's how it's looking, and it's looking very healthy indeed, because I've now got options. I've got charges I can do, because the Stampede can be seen over the hill, and all 3 of my Troll Hordes are in charge range of them, and the Bruiser as well. So the choices I have, I can do a double charge on one of them. I can do a single charge into another. I'm thinking I can do a triple charge here, with the bruiser and the two right-hand hordes into the right stampede, and then single charge the trolls on the left into the stampede over there. Because really, if you're going to charge them, you have to kill one of them. You don't want two stampedes hitting you back with the potential to take out two of your units. You need to kill something, so you really want to go all in and just take it out. So, turn 3. The Flaggit has just positioned himself in front of the Lycans a bit, mainly to be annoying. If they want to charge anyone, they're definitely going to have to go through the difficult terrain there, but I don't think they care about that. I think all the herd stuff has Pathfinder, if I remember correctly, and the stampedes have Strider as well. So I think he's just positioned himself there to limit who they can charge with their nimble. And I'm going to be shooting them up, put a bit more damage on them, but can't waver them again, so they are going to be able to get in the fight next turn. The single troll horde do some damage to that stampede there, and the triple charge, there was just enough space for them all to fit on the front. Because of the angle of the units, it was questionable whether they would all fit in because they weren't perfectly aligned, but we tested it out and they did all fit in. So 2 troll hordes and the bruiser all into that stampede. They are eaten, and the troll horde there on the hill have turned round so that no one's flanking them. And I've also pulled back the other troll horde so that they can't be flanked by the stampede in some kind of corkscrew charge shenanigans. So they would only be able to flank charge the bruiser, I think, in a minute, which would be okay if they want to prioritise taking him out when there's all these troll hordes around. So I think the bruiser has yet to bounce back there when the picture was taken. But again, it's looking very healthy at the moment, and the trolls are doing the business. And the units are just doing their job, basically. So, let's assume that the bruiser should have probably got wavered at least when he was countercharged by the stampede. Had he become wavered, he is nimble, so he would have been quite easily been able to get out of the way a bit. I wouldn't have been able to do as devastating a charge. I would have maybe had to just have 2 units charging into one of the stampedes, which may still have been enough to kill it. So I don't think the bruiser made that big of a difference, his survival. He is vital at the moment, because he's inspiring and everything, but I think I still would have been able to have a similar kind of thunderous attack had he become wavered or even killed, because he did his job, which was just to block them up. Everything he's doing now is just a nice bonus on top. So the stampede are going back into the trolls there, and the spirit walkers find a flank on the bruiser, so they should be able to kill him, you would think. And they do, in fact. And the troll horde are dead as well. So, a couple of units down, but that's okay. It's kind of expected. And the Lycans eat the Flaggit. They decide to charge him because they couldn't, even with their nimble, they didn't have enough pivots to reach the trombone, I think, which is what they wanted to eat. I think it was the trombone anyway. I can't see where it is right now. But the mincer is hanging out there, and he's a threat. So there's how it looks at the moment. So, there are 3 big nasty herd units, and I've got 3 killer units left as well. But it's my turn next, crucially, and I have the option of a double charge on the Lycans with the trolls and the mincer, which I would expect to kill them because they're already wounded. I've also got the Fleabag Sniffs down there as well, who could join in. And then I've got my trolls, who could charge into the Spirit Walkers or the heavily wounded Stampede. I think you know which one I would consider to be more of a threat there. And then there's the War Trombone. So turn 4. Triple charge. The Sniffs decide to join in as well, just to make absolutely sure that the Lycans are dead. And it also gets them further up the table because this is Dominate and they want to get into the centre, so they're all in a position to get over there now, and that's how they've turned themselves at the end of the combat. So Lycans are dead with that triple charge. I think only the Trolls became hindered. The other Trolls, they do charge into the Stampede and finish them off, as expected, because they were already quite heavily wounded. And the War Trombone just gives the Centaur Chief a bit of a cheeky blast in the rear. So it's looking very, very healthy now. It looks like it's going to be a win at this stage. There's only 1 scoring unit left for the herd, and unless they can kill unwounded Trolls in 1 hit, then they are going to get double charged with 1 in the flank next turn, because those Trolls over on the right are staring a hole in them. So turn 4 for the herd. and they do charge into the trolls. They've just got to go for it at this stage. You might as well take the risk and hope for a good roll, but they do not kill them. The trombone gets eaten by the centaur chief though. A bit of revenge for that cheeky blast. And there's how it's looking at the end of the herd turn. Not much action, so that unit of Spirit Walkers are going to get double charged by trolls, and it's been pretty much game over for a little while. Turn 5 of the goblins, so yeah, the result of that double charge, one in the flank, one in the front, they're dead. There's no scoring units left for the herd now, so unless my opponent kills absolutely everything with 2 individuals, which I don't think there's enough turns to even do that. Yeah, well I suppose if they kill 1 unit each, which is not very likely because one of them's a shaman. So they're all my units are in a good position to score as well. So look at that human hand on the chess clock there. Turn 5, the herd. So the centaur goes into the sniffs thinking they're a killable target but doesn't take them out. And the shaman is actually running away. Just preserving some points, I think. Turn 6. So the fleabag sniffs don't really do anything there. The trolls just turn round to face that character, and everything else just make sure that it's within 12 or majority within 12 of the centre before I finished moving. Not much going on there. Turn 6 for the herd, so the centaur is just moving away a bit. It's still in with the possibility of being charged by the trolls, but before I were to make that charge I would have to make sure it wouldn't be accidentally carrying them out of 12 inches of the centre. So there is a turn 7, which means the trolls are able to eat the centaur chief and remain majority within 12 of the centre. Everyone else just gathers around the middle there. And that's the end of the game. So it's another, on the table at the end, it looks like a very convincing win for the goblins. So that is 4 wins in a row, still top at the table, and not quite maximum points for that game because the shaman was worth enough points to prevent me getting maximum kill point bonus. And also I only had 4 units in the scoring zone at the end, so for tournament point purposes that's worth 4 rather than 5. So nearly maximum points in 3 of my 4 games so far. And then game 1 was the lowest scoring so far, and even that was fairly convincing in the end as well. So going into game 5, at this point I know for a fact, because I've heard mumblings around the room, that I'm the only person to win all 4 games so far that I'm aware of. So I'm definitely at the top of the table. So presumably a draw in the final game should be enough to give me the tournament. And even if I lose convincingly, I would still be in with a good chance of getting something like 3rd place. So the final game. Now, there were a few armies there that I thought, I'm not sure how I'd do against that. And this is one of them. Any army that has lots of fast, hard-hitting units that can potentially do some serious damage to trolls in one round, and especially if they've got things backing them up that can join in with the charge. If they can get multi-charges in, they'd definitely kill trolls in one go. And this army is the one that I'd pinpointed in my mind as something I did not want to face because I think it would give me the most trouble. And this is ogres, and it's just a ton of ogre chariot regiments. So let's see exactly what's on there, and this scenario is push. So there are 2 push tokens each, and on my enemy's force there's only 1 unit that's not cavalry, I think, so that's obviously going to be the unit carrying the push tokens. I can put mine on the mincer because that's the slowest unit that can carry the tokens. So let's have a look. Actually, if you see the terrain there, I've got some nice woods on this side, but the sniffs aren't going to be too eager to go and dance into those woods because look what's facing them down. There's 3 enemy units on that side. But my plan here is to kind of push through the centre where the extra token is. So you'll see how that factors into my deployment in a minute. So on this side I've just got the sniffs who are almost hugging the back of the board because they want to tie up that enemy flank for as long as possible. And here's my centre with the mincer being protected, carrying the tokens in there. The trombone is there as well, and just a big wall of troll meat in front. And over on this side we've got 1 troll unit and the other sniffs and the flagget. So the enemy force. There is the chariot regiment there. There's a chariot, chariot warlord. So there's the formation that gives him rallying, and there's another chariot regiment further on as well. There are some red goblin scouts there. There's Grokkagamok's finest braves, which are a very scary unit, very difficult to kill in one go. They've got great nerve, and they hit very hard as well. There is also a standard bearer on a chariot, which makes him dangerous because he is an ogre after all. And there's the other chariot regiment and another unit of scouts. So it's very, very fast, mobile, and we'll see how I deal with it, because he's got all his tokens on the braves there, on Grokkagamok's braves. Actual Grokkagamok is not in the list. He would be very expensive at this point level, but I would still be tempted to put him in there because he's so good. So, turn 1. And the ogres take it. So it's push, so they want to get as close to my half as possible with their tokens. So everything just pushes up. So a lot of the stuff is in charge range already. So all I can do now, my plan is to mitigate the effects of that charge. So if I can prevent myself being multi-charged, move back out of charge range where possible, and even though it's tempting to push forward in this scenario, I think if I can make sure the charges that are coming in are favourable, I think I can win the fight, but I'm not that confident. I need to be very careful with what I allow to charge and where. So, on the other side, on the left, there's nothing in the woods yet, which means I can't shoot them without going into the woods myself, but we'll see. There is also this little forest here at the bottom of the screen, which is a very small forest next to the larger one, and it being height 4, that's actually perfect because I can keep my trolls behind that and chariots won't be able to see, so I can avoid somewhat the effects of being flanked there. I think this is the same table I was on earlier against the undead. Turn 1 for the goblins. So most things are pushing up a bit, but you can see I'm keeping them around that little wooded area just to keep them out of the possibility of being flank charged, and I'm keeping most things out of charge range at this stage, if not everything, because I want to do a bit of shooting first. And what do I accomplish with that shooting? Well, just chipping away at the chaff unit, because I need to clear them out because they'll just be annoying to me, so I need to get them gone so the trolls can deal with the other units. And over on this side, a couple of damage plinked onto one of the chariot regiments because I couldn't see through the woods and I'm not ready to go into the woods and get charged yet. I want to prevent the charge as long as possible. So that's how it's looking. So there are some charge options available to my opponent, but I think the only thing that's in charge range is maybe the chariots in the middle might be in charge range of the bruiser, but are they willing to just go in there on their own? Questionable, but maybe. And I think the Red Goblin Scouts are in charge range of the trolls if they really wanted to do that, but that could be suicidal. Turn 2. So, the Red Goblin Scouts, they're obviously making a beeline for my sniffs instead. So they've just headed down the flank there, which is okay because I want to shoot them. And in the middle, well, the chariots have just edged forward a little bit, kind of inviting me to charge. I think they're only in range of... They may be in range of the bruiser and the trolls there, so he's kind of offering this unit up as a sacrifice, because there's no guarantee I would kill it, but probably would if I charge in the bruiser and the troll horde. But whatever happens, whichever way I turn, I would then be charged from multiple directions, because just to the left, you can see... Actually, you can't, because there's no picture of it, but to the left there, take my word for it, that he's turned his other chariot regiment to face the centre, and he's pushed forwards into the woods a bit. So you'll see what idea that gives me in a minute though. So, turn 2 for the goblins, and over here, these trolls can't go back far enough to avoid his charges now, so they're just going to have to grin and bear it. But I do manage to shoot down the Red Goblin Scouts with the diadem and the sniffs there. So they're dead. In the middle, the bruiser, on his own. He doesn't want any friends in this fight, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So, he's gone in, he's done a bit of damage, take away their thunderous charge, but I don't want to send everything in there. The whole idea of my plan to try and win this game is to get the first hit in, which is difficult when you're slower than most of the enemy units. So the way to do that is to put something juicy in front of them, so that they're then going to charge, and then they will end up in your charge range. So ideally he would charge into the flank of this bruiser with the finest braves and with the chariot unit that are over on the left as well, and triple charge it. And I don't actually think he could triple charge it. Maybe he could, because if he went in with the... I don't think he would have enough pivots to get the braves in there. He might. I can't see exactly how they're lined up there. I think they can see the bruiser though. So I think he would. I think there is a way he could do a triple charge here. So ideally he would do that and then kill the bruiser, but then he's got multiple units in charge range of my trolls now, allowing me to get in the first hit, which is absolutely crucial for kind of the mid-nerve units around the kind of 15, 17 kind of range. So a lot of ogre units are around that area, trolls similar as well. So getting the first hit in there can be very important sometimes, especially if against a unit that hits really hard, like the braves there who have even higher nerve, and the chariot regiments. Raphael Marge says triple charge would be an overkill. Yes, it would. It would be very much an overkill. But at the very least, it's going to bring 1 or 2 units into range to be charged by me first. Because I don't think he's just going to sit back and just charge in with 1 unit into the troll bruiser, because he's very unlikely to kill it now he's lost his thunderous charge there. And best case scenario, he would roll horribly and fail to even kill the bruiser, and then be exposing 1, possibly 2 flanks to my army as well. So we'll see. It's a calculated risk that I think is worth taking at this point. Obviously, that's why I've done it, because I want to get the first hit in. So I want to lure enemy units into range, because you can see I've got both troll hordes there primed and ready to hit anything that charges into the bruiser, and they're staying out of charge range of the braves as well. So I've got the mincer there as well with the tokens over on this side. So my sniffs go forward into the woods, because the only thing they're worried about there are the chariot regiment, and the chariot regiment has turned away to look at the middle. So I can quite happily go forward into the woods now and shoot up that unit and waver them. Raphael says 1 chariot regiment with no thunderous charge would not be enough. I agree. So they're probably going to have to charge something else into the flank of the bruiser and risk exposing the flank of that unit, or at the very least the front of it after they rotate at the end. So I managed to waver that unit, which means that the sniffs are going to win this fight, I would imagine, barring any kind of disaster, and that means I can then start to threaten the flank now. So I'm pleased that he turned this chariot regiment away from this area, because the sniffs were really here just to slow down that region, and now I can actually use them for a greater purpose, and I don't just have to throw them away. I can use them to actually threaten once I've chewed through these Red Goblin scouts. So there's how it's looking, and I've made sure that those chariots on the left can't see anything other than the troll bruiser at the moment, because there's a forest in the way, so everything else is hiding. The trombone is making sure it's out of charge range of everything. My opponent has some options. On the right there, I've put that troll unit, left them in charge range. I don't think I could back away far enough to be out of it, but I wouldn't mind if he charges the warlord and the chariot regiment into that troll unit. I suspect it will be enough to kill the horde, but that means that he's not blocking in my troll horde with the warlord. The troll horde I'm talking about is the one in the middle of the 3, the one below the fence, because he can see it and he is in range to charge it, I think, but the horde is not. So does he split the charge? Because if just the chariot regiment on its own probably won't be enough to kill an inspired troll horde in one round of shooting. One round of attacks, I suspect. So he may want to go for the double charge to make sure, which means he's leaving my middle troll horde unobstructed. There's also the option of just throwing Grokkamok's braves just forward to block my path, which would be a bit crazy because they'd just get butchered by everything around there. So the chaff units being out on the flank, he could have really done with some chaff in the middle here, because he's about to be put into a position where my heavy hitters are going to be able to hit his heavy hitters first, potentially, in the middle. So turn 3, they do go for the double charge, which means they're neglecting the centre, and I would expect them to kill that horde though. In the middle, he sends 1 unit into the flank. So 2 chariot regiments have charged into Mr. Bruiser there, and Grokkagamok's Braves are staying back. They are not joining in. So let's see what happens. That troll horde gets killed, which is pretty much expected. And I've got multiple units around here who can kind of dance around a bit and hopefully hold them up for a little while so they take their sweet time getting involved in the game. And look at this. The absolute dream scenario. So Mr. Bruiser, who, if I could pick one moment in the entire tournament for my opponent to roll a double 1, it would have been right here. On the Bruiser, so this chariot regiment is now exposing its flank to my army, and the other chariot regiment can't now go backwards D3, which would potentially take them out of charge range of some of my units. So they're now all stuck, and the Bruiser can also join in with the fighting as well. Can you get more of a dream scenario? So, the worst case scenario was that the Bruiser was just going to die, and the chariot units would back up or turn round and face me and then get charged in the front. But this is absolutely perfect. So, that chariot unit there on the left is going to get flanked big time, and the chariot unit that the Bruiser is staring at is going to get charged by him on the counter, and then something else is going to be able to join in as well because they're stuck in range now. So that's the perfect time for a double 1. And especially when you're in a tournament that doesn't have the once per game reroll, it adds so much more tension to moments like this, because you know that when you are sending something into an enemy unit like that and you're exposing the flank, you can't afford a double 1. So you have to think really carefully about whether to even send the unit in there when there's no rerolls available. If you have rerolls, you just throw them in there, thrust them in willy-nilly, because you know you've got that to fall back on, but it adds a lot more tension when there is no reroll. So that double 1 has really, and I think probably, I'm not going to say it's going to be a mopping up exercise now, but I'm confident I'm going to kill both those chariot regiments in the middle now. Those Red Goblin Scouts on the left are going to be dead, and the other units that are over there on the right are not facing in a direction that's really that helpful to them at this stage. As far as supporting the centre, where it is really important now, that's where all the tokens are. So, turn 3, and I do roll a double 1 there when shooting that chariot regiment, but they weren't actually at death's door. They did get tromboned and diademed and pin-cushioned, but it doesn't look like they're close to death particularly, so it's not an important double 1. And in the middle, look at this. So all those chariots in the middle are dead. The chariot regiment that went into the flank of the Bruiser were charged in the flank by a horde of trolls and the Mincer. They were eaten. The Bruiser and the other troll horde charged into the unit in the front, and they were eaten as well. And the Bruiser has overrun. He picked up a token when he got to the centre as well. I don't know if I mentioned that. So he's got that token, and he's overrun, so he's out of the charge arc of the standard bearer on the chariot and the finest braves now. So he can just head into enemy territory. He's so wounded I don't even care if he's not involved in the fight anymore. He shouldn't even be alive, so it's just a bonus. He can just go and carry that token off into the sunset for all I care. And the other units have just turned themselves to face promising directions. So there's how it looks. And the Mincer wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be flank charged by the Warlord in the bottom right there, which he did make sure of that. But the trombone's going to get eaten, but you just have to accept that sometimes. So over on this side, the Red Goblin Scouts are dead as well, so these guys can actually join in the fight and threaten the flank, where it looked like they were going to die and then the enemy would have been able to sweep in with those chariots and maybe even the scouts to help from that side. It's now me that's sending in a unit to help from over there, which is a big boost. So, the Grokkagamok's finest braves do present a problem. They're going to charge one of my troll hordes, but that horde will be inspired, so whether they kill it or not, it's be close, but you would hope to survive that while inspired. And it's the Dwarven Ale unit as well, so if they become wavered, they're not even bothered about that most of the time, assuming I pass the headstrong roll. Over on the right, I would expect the Fleabag Sniffs to get killed and the War Trombones get killed, and then those units will be able to turn back towards the action, but hopefully it'll be too late by then. That's what I'm hoping. Turn 4, so The ogres, the standard bearer finds a way to nimble through this wall of green and white and gets into the mincer in the front, so he's not as bothered. And the braves do go straight into the troll horde, as you'd expect. And the chariot regiment over on that side go after the sniffs, as expected, and dead. And war trombone dead as well, of course. The mincer gets wavered, and is carrying tokens, so potentially there could be some trouble there. And there's how that looks. And this unit becomes wavered as well, 10 damage. So they were skirting around the edge. You'd hope that if you take 10 damage, he needs to roll... I think he needed to roll 6 because ogres are all brutal, so he needed to roll 6 twice to kill them. But obviously couldn't do it twice. And that bruiser there helping out with the inspiring is a big deal there, him still being alive. So wavering the unit with Dwarven Ale, never a good time. Turn 4, so the diadem actually finishes off the chariot regiment over on this side that just killed the sniffs. So that's nice, he's paid for himself at least there, several times over. The sniffs on the other flank have come back to help out now, and they shoot up the warlord on chariot a bit, and they double one him, but it's not an important double one. He's not taken much damage yet. The mincer drops the tokens under itself, so it's not carrying them anymore, because it doesn't want to just be charged. It's going to get charged in the flank probably by the warlord, and in the front by the standard bearer, so it doesn't want them to just steal the tokens off it after it dies. So if it drops them, they will have to consider overrunning, which means they can't then turn to face a different direction. So I want them to overrun, so they're facing the wrong way if they want to collect those tokens. And over here you can see that the braves get killed. The Dwarven Ale unit pass the headstrong roll, they get double charged, 2 hordes of trolls to the face, kills them. And steal their tokens as well. So it's looking very healthy for the goblins at this stage. So the bruiser just runs away a bit and turns back around. You can see he's regenerating some of those wounds as well. He's still carrying that token, I think it just fell off. So that's how it's looking. So the trolls, that front unit can be charged by the warlord, I think, but the back unit is the one that's carrying the tokens. So we'll see whether he goes for that or whether he goes for the mincer, which is sitting on top of 2 tokens but not carrying them. Raphael says that Troll Bruiser is surely MVP. At this stage, it certainly looks like he is. So, turn 5, and they do kill the mincer, but look at this. So, what happens is, he had the opportunity to overrun with the warlord and pick up the tokens. He only needed 1 or 2 inches on the dice, but he chose to overrun. Because he wanted to turn the warlord round to threaten my army, he chose to overrun with the standard bearer, but I think he only rolled a 1 or a 2. So he actually ended up blocking the warlord, so the warlord couldn't then overrun because the standard bearer was in the way, so neither of them could pick up the tokens. So the warlord just decided, you know what, I'm going to turn around and just threaten the trolls instead, because if I just let them run off over there with the tokens, then we've got no chance. So that is actually how they end up, I think. Or is it that? I think he was messing around with them, trying to figure out the best way to angle the units to avoid my charge of those trolls there, because that's the troll unit that's not carrying tokens, so of course I'm quite happy to throw them into combat, so he wants to stay out of their charge arc, so he was fiddling them around to make sure it was in the perfect position there. Turn 5 for the goblins. So the back unit drop the tokens, and the bruiser then goes and picks them up. So the back unit can then charge this guy, which they can see, and they waver him in combat, which is great. The other trolls had to just move forward out of the way. You can see them on the right there, sitting on the fence. And the sniffs have moved up, and they shoot the standard bearer in the side, and they waver him as well. So both the ogre surviving units are wavered now, and the bruiser is, look at that, he's just got 3 tokens, and he's just sitting pretty in enemy territory. And he's regenerated all but 2 of his wounds now, so he's totally the MVP right now. And that's how it's looking. So 2 wavered enemy characters. So what do? Well, they just rotate a bit, as you'd expect, because there's not much they can do. So turn 6 for the goblins, and look at that. The trolls charge into the warlord again, kill him, the diadem and the sniffs shoot the standard bearer and kill him. Ogres tabled, and the tokens have been taken off the table at this point, but I couldn't get to the 2 at the bottom, but it doesn't matter because the bruiser is sitting pretty in enemy territory. All those units survive. The bruiser's there with 3 tokens on him, which have been moved by this point, but it's another big win. Bruiser, total MVP, and it shows you the power of the double 1, but also it's not like there was no strategy behind it either. It just wasn't expected to go that well. It was expected to help, it wasn't expected to completely win me the game almost on its own, which it may well have done. So that's another maximum points in the final round of the tournament. And considering I was already top of the table, then you would expect that anyone out there would have found it difficult to catch up unless there's some really shady points shenanigans or bribery of the tournament organiser going on. So at this point it seemed like it was a pretty obvious tournament win for me, which would be my first ever Kings of War tournament win. But let's find out. Bum bum bum, there we go. AltiBASH 7 Kings of War, first place, May 2019. It's now sitting pretty among all my 2nd and 3rd place trophies. There's a lot of 2nd place actually, but this is the first place trophy I've ever got for Kings of War at the 29th attempt, so I think it was about damn time, to be honest. Considering it took me 1 Dreadball tournament to win a first place. I think it was maybe my 4th Dead Zone tournament, something like that, I got first place. Let's see, what else have I won? I won a Relics tournament. That was quite a few tournaments in, that took me a few, but maybe no more than 4 or 5. But 29 tournaments to finally win one, that shows you, it either shows you that A, there were lots of people better than me there, or B, it just takes a long time to get good enough at this game to compete at a high level. I think it's a combination of the two things. It's an easy game to learn the rules, but it's very difficult to get to a stage where you feel you can actually beat the good players if you play well and you have luck on your side. Obviously you need luck to win a tournament unless you're an absolute beast. There are a couple of players out there in the community that don't even need any luck to win tournaments, but I think the rest of us mere mortals certainly do. And I can see lots of party related emojis going on in the chat right now. So don't thank me, thank the Troll Bruiser. So let's see here, anything else I want to talk about on this sheet? Okay. I didn't play against the army that won the Best Painted award, which was a very nice Kings of War historical army actually. I think it was Mongolians. So I didn't play against them, but they won the Best Painted, and I think I voted for them as well. Yep. Because they were, in my opinion, the nicest looking army there. And let's have a look at the full trophy cabinet there. There we go. So it's filling up nicely. The left-hand side was reserved for soft awards, like Best Army and Best Terrain and so on. But you can see it's looking a bit sparse, so the actual placings trophies are spilling over onto the left-hand side now. And you can see my relics certificates at the back, because obviously they didn't have trophies. And there's a Dead Zone first place dog tag on the left. There's a Dead Zone Best Terrain dog tag. The big row of Kings of War trophies there. There's a Dreadball trophy, a Dreadball second place medal. There's my Kings of War last place spoon at the back there, behind my Kings of War Best Army as well, which is one of the ones I'm most proud of, considering I'm not the best painter in the world. And the Rordia army that I won it with, mainly I started taking that as kind of a hobby project, and also to kind of promote the guy who I'm sure is probably watching this video at some point, out there with his range of undead halflings. So the fact that I was able to get some placing trophies with that army later is a nice bonus as well, but that was mainly to try and win something for my hobby ability. So I kind of made really elaborate bases on that army, and it paid off because there's a little tiny glass trophy at the back there for that. So Raphael says, very nice armies. It's great to see all painted games. Yeah, there were a few armies at the tournament that weren't fully painted, but I didn't play against any of them. And everyone else saying congratulations. And there we go, we're back to the thumbnail. And anything else? Well, overall, the list obviously performed very well. 3 troll hordes at such a low point level is a lot, and I think at least 1 or 2 survived every single game. So they're obviously difficult to deal with. If you can't kill them all in one go, when they're regenerating, and the bruiser regenerating as well, if you fail to kill them, you really pay the price for it. And I was doing my best most of the time to prevent them being multi-charged by units that were likely to kill them. The only time I got multi-charged were either times where it was unavoidable. There were a couple of those where your opponent just has more units there than you do. They've invested more on that side of the table. Or where I'm intentionally trying to get multiple units to attack one of my units so I can get them closer to me. And obviously a couple of notable times that paid off. There was the game against the Salamanders where I got all those Corsairs close so that I could charge them all, and obviously in the last game there with the Troll Bruiser being double wand and showing insane courage in the face of adversity there, just taking endless damage, but he doesn't care. And really, this list is kind of what I was running at 2,000 points, but with all the stuff taken out that isn't as good. So, yeah, because I don't have just 6 hordes of trolls to throw onto the battlefield. I've only got 3. So I think my Goblin army was kind of perfect for this points level with these units. I think this is a fairly optimal list. I don't think I would change anything, probably. If anyone has any other ideas for lists at this point level for Goblins that are different, then let me know. But I think this is very, very competitive, obviously, considering it was large wins in all 5 games, some of which, in fact, I would say all the people I played were very good. I didn't play often at a tournament. In the first couple of rounds, you either face someone who's new, or maybe in the second round, if 2 new players were matched up in round 1, in round 2, even if you win, you can face someone who's quite new. But in this tournament, all the people I faced actually finished high up the table. I think I beat the person that finished 2nd, 4th, and 5th, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So 3 of the people I beat were very high in the table, and the other 2 were mid-table finishes. So I didn't beat anyone at the bottom of the table. So I think that makes it even more either impressive or just generally exciting, depending which way you want to look at it. So I know for a fact that one person in the community is putting together a 2,000 point list that I suspect will be similar to the way this is, but scaled up, like a zillion trolls and sniffs. And I wouldn't look forward to facing it on the table, but I look forward to seeing how it does on the back of this success for me here. I think the fact that it was at a low points level this tournament meant that people were trying out different things. There's no real set meta for this point level because there just aren't that many games played there, so people didn't just have an auto list they could take. I think if it was more common, this point level, I think you would see other people try out something like this, because I think it is very powerful. The trolls are cheap enough so that you can fit them in, spend half your points on them, and they're a really hard-hitting core of the army, and then everything else you're putting in there really complements them very well. You've got the sniffs that are really good, shooting mobile platforms, and if you need to throw them away as chaff now and then to get in the way of a stampede, for example, then you can, because they're fast enough and mobile enough to get there. If not, they can just be sitting on objectives being weapon platforms, and you've got a lot of unit strength already just with those 5 units, the trolls and the sniff regiments. Then the trombone and the flagget giving you some breath attacks to deal with flyers that want to land behind your lines, in addition to the sniffs that can deal with them as well. So tons of flyer defense for such a low point level. The troll bruiser adds more punch with his regeneration as well, and inspiring the trolls, which is very important, keeping things inspired. And the mincer is just, it's a combat threat and it's cheap. So I think all round it's just an extremely solid list that contributed greatly to my victorious performance at this tournament. Right, let's make the old webcam disappear now. And time for some parting words. If anyone has got any comments they want to drop in there, if you've been watching silently, then let me know quick before I go off the air if you want to get any kind of recognition for your dedication to watching this whole thing. Don't forget to check out the links in the description. Twitter, my Facebook group, which a few people have been joining recently, and I'm sure now that I'm considered one of the top players, of course, with a tournament win. That means I'm officially in the rankings of the elite right now. So everyone should be joining my Facebook group to keep up with what I'm doing hobby-wise, so they can kind of jump on the bandwagon. Whatever I'm doing must be good, considering I'm such a top player now. Top player in all caps, by the way. And also don't forget to send me all your money and all that good stuff as well. The kind of thing that all us YouTube people have to say at the end of the video. And obviously very pleased with the win, but even more pleased because, of course, today, for anyone who follows the world of sport at all, will know that Manchester City won the Premier League for the second year in a row, which is obviously more important than Kings of War, and that pleased me greatly. If we hadn't have won that game today and hadn't won the league, then I doubt I would have done this video, because I wouldn't have been in a very good mood. I probably would have gone straight to bed instead. But I decided, while on the natural high of winning a tournament and then watching my team win on TV, then why not just fly straight into this report tonight and doing something else tomorrow instead that isn't a tournament report. Right, that's enough from me. Time to wrap this one up. All that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.